Tell us a little bit about queer history. Donald, why don't you take it away? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, my name is Donald Bruce. I'm a queer man who grew up in Southern California and came out here in the mid '70s when I was in my 20s. Seen a lot, been through a lot, seen the development of Pride from 30 people straggling down Hollywood Boulevard to the major event is now in West Hollywood. Um, Times have changed a lot. We really have to be careful that we don't forget about what went before, because there's some nice things looming on the horizon, unfortunately. Yeah. But
Well, why don't you tell us about that experience? Like, what was it growing up? Being queer from your generation.
it was a much more difficult and a much more dangerous thing to come out when I was sort of at the tail end of it. Before 1976, homosexuality was against the law. Just being queer was against the law in California. Um, there was still the fear that coming out was something you did only among your friends, the people that you trusted, because there was a possibility of losing your job, being jailed, being fined. Um, this goes back, I mean, we talk about Stonewall being the primary stimulus for gay pride, but there were events that happened in Los Angeles prior to that, back as far as 1967.
Yeah, you were talking about there was
Uh,
the donut shop,
yeah,
right?
Cooper Donuts,
That,
which was down roughly Fifth and Hill. Um, Pershing, the center of queerdom in Los Angeles at that point was downtown, and with a little bit of a few bars in Hollywood, a few bars in Silver Lake, but mostly downtown. Um, Pershing Square was the big cruising place. That's where all the hustlers hung out. And one night, three people have been arrested in Cooper's Donuts, um, and the drag queens and the queers and everybody that hung out in there started throwing coffee cups and donuts and stuff at the cops. The three people that had been arrested managed to escape, but the cops arrested 9 others that were involved in the riot, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. And one of the people that was involved, one of the original people that had been arrested, is an author by the name of John Rushing. And his book, City of Night, really, it's a novel, but it's really autobiographical, and it really talks about what queer life was in the 50s in LA. So if anybody wants to know, that's a good place to start. The next big event was the Black Cat in Silver Lake. It was a restaurant and bar. And on New Year's Eve in 1967, the police raided it. And police raids were really dangerous for 2 reasons. One, the cops weren't exactly nice. And second of all, if it left you up to exposure as being gay, and you could lose, as I said, you could lose your job. It was exposing you to your family. It was forcing you out.
wow, they like dragged it publicly. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty intense.
So a month later, there was a demonstration in front of the Black Cat, protesting the way the police had handled themselves, protesting the fact that they'd been raided. There was nothing going on. There was nothing. The couple of people that were arrested for indecent exposure were later released with no charges. They were just harassing. Gee, we have nothing better to do on a New Year's Eve. Let's go harass a queer bar. That's kind of the attitude.
What were you doing around that time?
Trying to make up my mind whether I wanted to come out. I mean, it's still a little early for me. I was aware that I was different. I was aware that there was something going on. The Advocate existed at that particular point in time, as did the Mattachine newspaper. Mattachine Society was a was an early gay rights organization that Harry Hay, who was, as far as I'm concerned, one of the true pioneers of the freedoms that we have now, started an organization, and it eventually morphed into an organization called One, and the Gay Archives at University of Southern California are essentially Harry's papers. They're essentially the papers that were when One ceased to exist. Harry gifted them and gave them to USC to start the archive. So there was stuff going on, and it was enough that a 19, 20, 21-year-old kid from the San Gabriel Valley who was experiencing life on his own at UCLA and being involved in the anti-war movement, being involved in some of the other social unrest, social politics that were going on at the time. You sort of had the opportunity to see what was happening and see what was going on, but you also heard about things like the Black Cat and some of the other things that had occurred. The other one that you and I briefly talked about when we talked about me doing this was the Mark IV slave auction. Mark IV was a bathhouse on Melrose, just east of the Hollywood Freeway, and the center, I think it was a benefit for the center. I don't actually remember what it was. It was a benefit for somebody. I think it was the center. The center had just been formed.
That's crazy. They named it the slave auction.
Yeah. Well, and it was part of the leather community.
The leather community, yeah.
The leather community was putting on this fundraiser to raise some money, and through the limited amount of advertising that happened, and because it was a charity event, and because it was slave auction in quotes and everything, they weren't exactly it wasn't done as subterfuge. It was done fairly openly. But Ed Davis was the chief of police at the time, and he decided
not a nice guy.
Yeah, not a nice guy. He decided that he was going to make an example of all this. And so, I mean, it was like an armed insurrection. I mean, they had helicopters, they had like 40 or 50 cops. It was just this big deal, and they arrested a bunch of people. And that became a flashpoint at that point, later. We were talking about the parade. Morris Kite and Don Kilhefner, who founded the center, the year after Stonewall, decided that they were going to have a parade because there was a parade going to be in New York, and they were going to have a parade. And they rounded up 30 or 40 brave souls and got a parade permit, fought for one and finally got it, and marched down Hollywood Boulevard.
I mean, that must have been because back then it was really, we're here, we're queer, get used to it. And it was like shit that people just were not used to seeing, right? Like, yeah, I think you're talking about a giant penis and like all these things. I mean, that sounds super racy for that time.
It was, and it was really in your face. I mean, they had one of the units that Morris drug around to every Pride parade for probably the next 10 years was what he referred to as the Caucasaurus. And the best way to describe it is that it was very much like a Chinese dragon dancers that you see in the Chinese New Year's parade and at different Chinese events, where there was a head and this long body behind it that there were people wandering around underneath holding up, except that it was a cock. And
can you imagine that coming at you at
and you're walking down, you're somebody with their kids walking down Hollywood Boulevard, not knowing what's going on, and you see this marching down the middle of the street. And that was basically, it was Morris's, in your face, we're queer, we're here, get used to it. And so, I mean, and it, the second year it was a little bit bigger, it grew each year and got more participants and more people. and the reaction, it drew more people as a crowd. There were more people at the first one. There were more people on the sidewalk
I can imagine.
watching it than there were in it, and there were more queers on the sidewalk watching it because they didn't have the guts to be in it because of the risks that were involved.
Yeah.
And as the risks go down, I mean, one of the big fun things that happened was Don Kilhefner, who I mentioned before, he started a group called the Radical Fairies, and they were pretty left, on the left and a little bit aggressive. And there was, I don't remember who it was, but there was somebody in the group that was a lawyer and that was pretty well versed in dealing with the legal issues that would be passed.
Was that group formed because of the whole you also mentioned before that gays weren't allowed to dance on the dance floor.
I'm going there with this. Okay.
I only bring that up because I love dancing on the dance floor. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I'll give you the details on that. No, it wasn't for that, but it was one of the first consciousness raising groups that existed within gay society, as far as really radical, healing, in your face, politically taking political stands and doing this. Up until, I can't remember what year it was. It had to have been, it was after it was legal. So it must have been in the late 70s. I can't actually remember now. I should have looked it up. I'm sorry. You couldn't dance together. And that was one of the you couldn't touch the bars. You couldn't walk down the street holding hands. You couldn't, there could be no physical contact. That left you subject to arrest.
I can't even imagine that nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, we really take that for granted, but there's some places in the country that we still can't do that. And people, sorry, go ahead.
Don and his group, there used to be on Santa Monica Boulevard, about 2 doors east of where Foo Bar is now, a bar called The Farm. And the owner of the farm would let people dance, and they would get raided. And so Don and his Radical Fairy group figured out everything that they needed to have in place to make it happen, and basically staged a dance in there that they advertised, and the police came in and started arresting people, and with the help of the ACLU and other like organizations, the Radical Fairies took them to court, and they won. So the farm initially was supposedly the only place you could dance, and then of course that fell by the wayside fairly quickly because you started having other places that started opening or would clear room out to have a dance floor. At that particular point in time, there were only 2 bars west of La Cienega, and one of them was a women's bar. The only other bar that existed on west of La Cienega is where Mickey's is now. It was a place called the 4-Star. And the women's bar was just on the other side of La Cienega and closed last year or the year before. It was called the Palm. And everything else was along Santa Monica, up and down Highland, and then over in Hollywood, on Selma, along in there, Selma and Cahuenga, in that general area, and then downtown.
Yeah, because you have like the Spotlight.
The Spotlight was really the last of the really old time divey Hollywood bars. But there were some fun times had in that bar and several of the other ones. It really, one of the things about the bar scene at that particular point in time, it wasn't as segregated as it is now. Just generally, there were predominantly women's bars. There were predominantly men's bars. There were men's bars that catered to men of color. The women were a little bit more integrated color-wise, but there was still, it was not unusual to go into the Spotlight or go into the Farm, or there used to be a place on Highland south of Santa Monica Boulevard, actually down around Willoughby, called Dude City. And that was another fairly big bar. It later became a dance bar called Probe, and was quite the place for a while.
Yeah, and then it turned into AD, I believe, right?
Say what?
I think it turned into AD or something after that.
No, that was over on Beverly. You're ahead of yourself.
I'm speaking for my gen.
Yeah, the AD was over on Beverly and just east of La Cienega. It was one of the first really big dance halls, and it was originally called After Dark. And then Studio One opened, and then Arena opened, or Circus opened, and Arena opened, and the bar started opening over on Santa Monica, over in Boys Town. And so, I mean, it was fun, and it was fun to watch this all change and to be more involved, and to, things started spreading out more. It was more. There were more bars in Silver Lake. There were more bars in Hollywood, and things became much more open. Mm-hmm. You had bars with windows in them, which you never had before. You had bars that had front doors on the street, mm-hmm. Whereas back when I first came out, the doors were always off and out. So you wouldn't be seen going into the bar. So it's changed a lot.
Do you feel that because we've, in a way, become so mainstream that we've lost that edge? We kind of touched on this, on the phone the other day, that, Pride is supposed to be a march, a protest. And I think, because we have been on shows, there's shows like, Modern Family, Will and Grace, all of those kinds of things. Do you feel like that's sort of taking the teeth out of it?
We have, as a community, as a culture, have lost our edge. We've lost our specialness. I can remember having conversations with straight friends of mine back in the 80s, when the AIDS epidemic was just starting, and in the late 70s, and about why we dressed the way we did, why we acted the way we did, why why we were also hypersexual, because that's the best way to term it. It was the time when, if you were out on a Saturday afternoon and you were walking down the street and somebody that was really hot walks past you, and you turn around and you both look over your shoulder, and then you turn around and you talk, and then you go home.
In there.
And go from there. And then you get done, you go home, you take a shower, you have dinner, whatever you do, and then you go out to the bars, and you may do it all over. But we existed in a sexual culture at that particular point in time, because that distinguished us from, okay, if we cannot be like you, if you won't let us be like you, then we're going to be this. And we're going to be happy, and we're going to have fun, and we're going to, be as degenerate as we want, and we're going to be as open and, as we want to be within our own environment. And there was an edge to that. There was a difference. We are different. And as much as I don't say I don't necessarily approve of gay marriage, I've been married to the same man for 26 years. Even before it was legal. We were together. We've been together for that long period of time. But I think with that, and with the adoptions and the families and all that, and if the number of gay bars, there's probably half as many gay bars in Los Angeles, if not less than that, that existed 20 years ago. There are, I cannot think of a gay restaurant, a restaurant that totally specifically caters to a gay crowd. And there used to be a dozen that I went to regularly, and probably as many again that I may have gone to once or twice or not gone to at all, but just knew about. So and we've lost that. We've lost that part of our culture. I think everybody's so excited about being able to marry, about being able to adopt, about having a family, about buying a house, about, all the things that make us part of the norm. Mm-hmm. We've lost a bit of our edge. Yeah. Pride Parade is no longer a demonstration. Mm-hmm. It's always been a demonstration and a celebration. But it's no longer a demonstration. It's just the celebration of it. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think it's necessarily that.
It's different. I mean, I feel like
it's different, and it's not. I think we've lost something that made us special. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's there anymore. I think it's okay. You've got two. You're married. You've got two kids. Mm-hmm. The straight couple that live next door to you are married, and they've got two kids, and you swap recipes over the back fence.
Literally.
I mean, really. I mean, that's, so there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that, to me, having grown up and gone through all of these changes and seeing that happen and seeing that point in time, that sort of was, AIDS really did away with it because it was so devastating to us. Mm-hmm. But to lose that specialness is really kind of sad to me.
Well, do you? I mean, what about the flip side of it though? Like losing, I understand like losing the specialness of it, but what about like the gaining of all the rights that we've gotten? I mean, we have come a long way as queer folk to be able to marry, to be able to not be fired on the basis of your sexual orientation. There's all those plus sides that sort of came along with the normalization, and obviously like brands have had a lot of influence on that because, especially with all the sort of sponsorships and putting queer people up front as spokespeople, like it's really normalized that whole, side of it. And even though it may not have its teeth, how do you feel about being able to do all those things?
I mean, it's something that I've gotten used to because I've made the progress. I've gone through the process. I've been there since, you had to go in the back door of a bar, and you couldn't wear a studded belt if you were going to a leather bar. You couldn't wear a studded belt unless it was safely chained between the two halves because it was considered a dangerous weapon.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine what they would have thought of Lady Gaga back then?
Yeah. And, I mean, the most outrageous thing in the world was Grace Jones.
I mean, she's pretty outrageous.
Yeah, Never lived until you've been in a small dance bar and then have her ride in the back of somebody, leaning against the back of somebody, driving her in on a motorcycle and going into I Need a Man. I mean, it's, there are points that have been, there are points in that whole history that have just been joyous and have been just super exciting and super, not too long after the law was changed, I was in a theater party that was going to see The Wiz down at the Music Center. And we parked in the parking lot, and we came upstairs on the escalator, and we got to the top of the Wiz, and we all joined hands and skipped across the plaza at the Music Center.
It's crazy that you wouldn't be able to do that at one point in our history.
That even 5 years before we did it, we would have been arrested. So I mean, I've seen the progression. I felt the progression. There's I think as part of losing that specialness, I think we've lost a little bit of the history. I think people don't, necessarily know what went before and how we got to this place.
Well, it's funny. I was going to ask you, what message would you have to give the young queers of today? And I think it might actually be as part of this.
Basically, read City of Night. Find out what it was like in the 1950s. Find out what it was like when everything was on the down low.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, because it's important, because those, like, know, if you don't know about your history, you're going to be doomed to repeat it.
Google events that, gay events that happened prior to Stonewall, and look and see what happened at Stonewall, and what happened before Stonewall, the Black Cat, the Cooper Donuts. And those were two things that happened here. There were things like that happened all over the country. I can't remember what the name of it is. There's a cafeteria in San Francisco that a similar thing to what happened at Cooper Donuts happened about a year later. I mean, these were major headline grabbing events that happened prior to Stonewall happening. So Marsha Johnson and some of the other people that are names that we know from Stonewall and the history of Stonewall, and the drag queens that picked up their stilettos and threw them at the cops, weren't the first. And we shouldn't negate what they did, but we need to look beyond that and look to see what was going on and why Stonewall happened. There's the story, but what really was the reason?
I mean, because especially with this administration, a lot of people in my generation, we've seen a lot of rights, maybe not necessarily in California, but rights have been attacked. And we could easily go back to those days of having to crawl or walk through the backs of alleys to get to our friends. And I think that's something that people need to, always have on the forefront.
There are 200 bills that have been presented in the last year to erode what we consider our rights. Mm-hmm. And there are still states in the United States where we have no job protection.
Yeah, I mean, the parallels right now between what's happening with the riots and the protests, I mean, they're there. I mean, it's literally like we've gone backwards into the 60s. So it's definitely something that, I appreciate you for, giving this interview and giving some insight behind it, because it is important. And I think so many people just don't know. I mean, and they don't teach gay history. You know what I mean? Like, if they taught this in schools, it would be really powerful.
Go and ask to see the archives, the One Institute archives at SC. A lot of it's been digitalized. A lot of it's online.
Yeah, they actually do have pamphlets, but I think it's interesting to be able to, talk it through with people and, and get those firsthand accounts, but also, if there's a way to also, present that in just a more audible way, I think it really will catch people's attention.
Let me think of anything else that I could suggest. I know one thing. You've never lived until you've been in San Francisco and seen 200,000 people on Market Street waiting for the parade to come through.
Well, I was going to ask you, what is your favorite parade moment? Or pride moment? I think that sounds like it's it.
That's probably it, because it was. I hadn't been out that long. Yeah. No, it was in the early '80s, so I hadn't been out that long. And I grew up in California, been in and out of San Francisco all my life. One of my first gay experiences, one right after I came out, was in San Francisco. I happened to have a flight screwed up and ended up, fortunately I had a friend that was living there at the time. Ended up spending what was supposed to be an overnight, ended up being a 4-day weekend. in the city. So I mean, it was my first, going into Twin Peaks at the corner of Castro and Market Street and going into a bar that had windows. Whoa. I mean, that way, and it was full. It was packed. It wasn't like there were two people, two people sitting at the bar in the back corner of the room. It was 5 o'clock, and there were 200 or 300 people. And, I mean, it was a big bar. But being there and being about, I don't know, we were a couple of blocks north of Civic Center, so you could see a good expanse of Market Street down to the Embarcadero, and seeing all of the people. And that was just amazing. That just really was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. And I've had fun with Pride. I mean, I was involved with the Rodeo Association, and I marched with the Rodeo Association. I marched with different groups that I was part of at that particular point in time. I was a volunteer at the center in the men's clinic when the center was over at Highland and Willoughby. I don't remember. It was on Highland just above Santa Monica Boulevard. And the center had a group that marched, and I marched with the group. It was still on Hollywood Boulevard. I've had plenty of very positive, very up experiences with being gay and being, and just being around, and never really being a shaker and mover, but being a participant in what was going on and knowing what was happening and keeping my ears open and my eyes open and seeing how the culture shifted and how the culture was changing. And I think it's very important that people start looking at what went before.
Yeah.
And if you want to, as I say, John Rishi's book is probably the most, it's autobiographical fiction. It was published as a novel, but it was basically his life, and he was a hustler, and he was, now he teaches writing at SC.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's so wonderful. And thank you for
Yeah.
the audience like where they can find more information. And what the importance of it is, I think a lot of people will be able to relate to some of these struggles, and and also remember that our rights aren't for free. They're not.
Yeah.
We have to fight for them. So it's been pretty insightful, all the wonderful things you have shared with us today.
The one thing that that makes it so much easier. I mean, I'd love for anybody, if they want to contact you and want to talk to me, fine. I mean, I'm more than willing. Our conversations have proved that I love to talk.
Yes, that 3-hour phone call the other night. Yes,
yeah. But if anybody wants to talk to me, I mean, I'm more than willing to talk to anybody that wants to call and say, hey, tell me about, or what was it like, or who, I mean, the changes have been substantial, both geographical as far as where things are. I mean, the whole West Hollywood scene, now Silver Lake's so gentrified that it's kind of hard to remember and hard to see what it was like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, but when there was as many bars in Silver Lake as there were in West Hollywood. There's still I'm more than willing to share my experience and share what went on and trouble I used to get into.
The used to? Are you kidding me? I'm sure you're still a little.
I'm an old married man. Come on. No, the trouble I get into now is with my mouth and online. I don't, haven't been running the streets in a long time.
Well, with that, everybody, that was Donald Bruce. thank you very much for giving us so much insight into our Pride history. So I can't wait to. I'm sure we will connect offline, and I'm really excited to hear more about this.
I'm really excited to see what you do with this. I'm really, I've seen the poster and I think and the announcement online, and I really am looking forward to seeing what the other people's interpretation of what your request is and what they have to add and what their perspective is. I know from experience that the perspective of people of color going through, they were going through a lot of the same issues that we were going through at the time, but they had the other issues that are on top of it because, the gay community as a whole has not been very welcoming, or there have been points in time when it's not been very welcoming. And I'm glad that's sort of lightened up a little bit, or at least it appears to from my perspective.
Yeah,
the bars I hang out in, the few that there are.
I have a hope with all of the protests and everything that we are getting stronger and more unified, not just in the gay community, but with our fellow men. So
yeah.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Today. Thank you, everybody. I will see you guys soon. Thanks, John.
Hi everybody, we're here with Miss Barbecue, the hostess with the mostest, the East Side Queen. Yes. Hi, Miss Barbecue. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing, considering everything that's going on right now. I'm doing amazing because I'm hopeful.
Good. Well, I think we all need a little bit of hope right now. It's very trying time for our community, especially minority people. And I think one of the things that has given me hope is to see the amount of people that have just taken to the streets for all the protests that are happening. We're literally, it almost feels like we're flashback to the 60s in a sense. When was the last time you got this many people together for a good cause? You know what I mean?
1992.
No, there you go.
With the Rodney King riots too going. It seems like every 10, 20 years we're in the streets, hollering about our rights over and over. That my only concern is it's 2020 and we're still marching in the streets.
Right.
Well, before we jump into it, do you want to tell the audience about yourself, what you do? You're like you do a little bit of everything. It's really interesting.
I do a lot of things.
Let's have it, honey. Let us know.
I'm a professional drag queen first, drag entertainer, singer, writer, producer, storyteller, curator. I have been on many panels. I'm moderating panels too. I've got to act and sing in movies and in music videos. And it's been such a beautiful ride to make this barbecue a platform to speak out. I was the keynote speaker for El Camino College this past week for their Pride Week. And it was the first time I got to be prepare a speech where I cited stuff from different organizations, and I added all that into my personal story.
That's great. Yeah, I've been keeping tabs on you because, we had a little conversation about this the other day on the phone, and I'm like, where has she been up to? I remember you used to be in the scene, everywhere. I was like, oh, she's there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. What?
Yes, hon. Yes. Well, in 2013. I went into rehab. I'm 6 years clean and sober as well.
That's awesome.
So for 2 years I had to put the drag away. I got sober. I was going to meetings and all that kind of stuff. So I had to put Miss Barbecue to the side and concentrate just on me. And then once that was over, I was afraid to step back on the scene. I was like, no one's gonna, I'm irrelevant now. Nobody cares. But when I stepped back on the scene as a sober queen, the love that I got from everyone was just so beautiful. And they were like, you found yourself, you look happy, you're glowing, it was all of that. And then 2 years later, I came out trans, femme, non-binary. And I think that's where a lot of people were like, oh, she's transitioning.
Oh my God.
She's not performing anymore. And I'm like, What happened to all my gigs? What happened? You know, and so getting that clear on what non-binary is, I think is key.
Yeah, I mean I mean even I was a little tripped up by that, as you well know. And I think
what do you know about non-binary? What do you know?
Well, why don't you tell us? Educate us. Let us. I mean, I was actually going to ask you, like, what is actually the history of that? What is the history of pronouns? I mean, because it kind of feels to a lot of people that they just came out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like where,
Yeah.
and it's almost like this age of Aquarius thing where it's been around, but like it's really just shown it's like look at me, like I'm here. Yeah. Listen.
Well, actually, non-binariness has been around for centuries. Mm-hmm. There have been tribes, all the way dating back to the Greek cultures, where a person who inhabited feminine and masculine traits was held up as shamans. And then, especially in the Aztec and in Indian cultures, in the India, they're known as the Hydra there, and that passed over. Where if a person wanted to transition from man to woman or woman to man, that is considered transsexual. Where there were those who stayed in the middle, no urge to transition, and they would come to like bless ceremonies, to bless weddings. They would bless births. People would come to us, because that's my history. People would come to us as advisors, and this is why it doesn't surprise me that Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson were like, they took in people, they cared for them. You know, that we have always been those people that people turn to. And so binary, non-binary, binary is like man, woman, right? Gay, lesbian, straight, all that kind of stuff. Non-binary is when you take out the gender and just have the energy. Yeah. Okay. So I was born with male parts, but I embody the divine feminine energy. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that I was doing that. So I was in the gay boy world. Imagine being in the gay boy world, but you have a divine feminine energy. I wasn't just flamboyant. Mm-hmm. I had woman energy. Right. So I would go on stage, and that's what made me such a convincing drag queen. Because they were like, you are just woman. Yeah. And I was like, well, thank you. But I'll tell you this: in all my 25 years of performing, I maybe have been approached by a gay boy in a romantic way twice. What? Twice.
What do you think that's about?
It was the divine woman energy.
Got it.
Guys, a gay man wants a gay man. Yeah. Whether they're flamboyant or femme, they still want man. They weren't reading man from me. They saw me and felt woman from me. And I thought something was wrong with me. Wow. So I would start drinking more, using drugs more, became homeless. It was all this shenanigans that happened because I didn't know how to. I was trying to fit in that gay boy lifestyle, and it just wasn't working.
Yeah. I mean, so it sounds like you needed to really discover who you were, and it sounds like you have now. But I mean, when you don't know who you are, like, how can you fit in anywhere?
No, and I was doing barbecue at the time, and everyone loved her. Everyone loves this, but nobody was paying attention to MJ, and I started resenting. This.
I've noticed that a lot in some drag queens where, like the persona takes over the spotlight. You know what I mean? And you're just like, yeah, and you're just like, well, what about me? I have like that's just the stage thing. Like I actually need love. I need like the human interaction. Like there's more to me.
Yeah, and it's always. And I found that I've managed to mesh them together. Mm-hmm. Someone told me when I was in rehab, they said, Whereas Barbecue is this creature you created out of your own mind. She's this creature that people have fallen in love with, and they listen to her. They listen to me. I have a platform. When I go into places, all of a sudden the energy changes in there, and I can use that for good. I can use that to, not just further my career, but to bring people with me. Yeah. rise up. If I rise up, we all rise up.
This is why I wanted to talk to you, because I mean that is what we've been doing with our platform. We do events with my brand Artificial People, and with the COVID thing, like we're like, well, shit, what are we gonna do? We're not gonna have any place to do events, because we don't want to get people sick. So what we did was we turned our entire like Facebook and social media presence into a community platform. So for us, it's always been like, if we rise up together.
Rise up together, and we have to get into that mindset. I think now that we've all gone onto this platform, we're all like into each other's stuff. Whereas when we're all performing outside of this, it was like, come to my party. No, come to my party. No, come to my party. Oh, we're on the same night. It felt very much like a competition. No, it did. It felt like a competition where you couldn't go to somebody else's party because someone else was doing something. But now there's like this, if anything, it's brought more community together. Mm-hmm. And it's brought us together on like, and now with BLM and all that kind of stuff, now it's like, oh, we have a cause. We have a cause to like go towards. And everyone's been home and cooped up with COVID. Now they have somewhere to put all their energy.
Yeah. I mean, well, what is your take on all of this? Do you feel hopeful?
People have been asking me about the COVID and asking me about Black Lives Matter and George Floyd. And it makes me wonder how many people had died like George Floyd, but weren't caught on camera. Mm-hmm. It made me sit back because I wasn't going to watch the tape. I was like, I don't want to watch it. It's too much. I don't want to watch the Aubrey one. I can't watch it. But then I was scrolling and then it popped on, and then you know how Instagram just automatically plays it? It automatically played it. And I was like, oh my God, that's, that easily could have been me. Easily could, as a Black trans person, that easily could have been me on the ground like that in a heartbeat. And so it made me angry. It made me sad. It made me wonder, what are we going to do as a community, as a society, to rise up like that? And what motivated me, invigorated me, was when I got asked to do that keynote speech. Mm-hmm. The theme of the speech was, we were built for this. We, as an LGBTQIA community, we were built for that kind of resilience. We've been struggling and striving and still being fabulous for the last 50 years. We've seen heartache. We've had cars burned up. We've had rocks thrown at us. We've had people yell faggot out the window as they drive by. We've had all that. We've had it for years. There's something to be said about any kind of movement, the women's movement, the Black movement, the LGBTQIA movement. Each one has had its same share of hatred, and we've come out of it. We've come out singing, we've come out dancing, we've come out glitter on the lips, honey. We've come out with bigger hair. Yeah,
you can't put 2 wigs.
2 wigs, honey. Stack them, honey. We've come out of that. We've come out of that stronger than ever. And I think this one I feel like it's lit a flame under this generation, and it's really motivating them to see, oh wow, racism happens still. It's like, yes, boo, welcome to 2020. The younger generation is seeing, hopefully they're understanding this is what our forefathers did back 50 years ago at Stonewall. Mm-hmm. Now do you see why we rioted? Now do you see why?
Yeah, and this is why, and why it's important to continue to have pride, and why it's bad if people start saying, oh, straight pride, because they're not straight people aren't being oppressed the same way gay people are being oppressed.
It's not at all. And my hope now, because there's a LA pride and there's a trans pride, mm-hmm. right? Trans people have to have their own pride. Black people have to have their own pride. Latino people have to have their own pride. Hopefully, with all of this too, we can start mending our prides together. Because yeah, we still separate ourselves, and especially within the trans community. You know, like you said, a lot of people don't understand non-binariness. They know trans men, trans women. That's all they know. But there's this middle, and I didn't know I could be non-binary. I'm in my 40s, and I was like, I could be non-binary? Oh my gosh. So there's a bunch of us, you know, in our 30s and 40s that are coming out non-binary. Sam Smith came out non-binary. That pretty boy from Queer Eyes come out non-binary. There's all these people coming out non-binary now because now it's like we're allowed to.
Yeah, and people didn't know that that was a thing or an option, right?
You know, that was an option. We didn't know that there were options.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and same thing with this protest and stuff. We know that there's options now. My only hope is that all of this marching and stuff starts policy change, starts getting more resources. I heard something on NPR. They said if more neighborhoods had resources, they wouldn't need to steal. They wouldn't need to sell drugs. They wouldn't need to do all those things because you wouldn't need to police them as much because they already have resources. Stop saying a food desert and put food in there. You know, when they go, South Central is a food desert. Well, if it's a food desert, put some damn grocery markets over there then.
And healthy ones.
And healthy ones and help them and help people with them instead of saying, oh, it's a food desert. It's like, well, you pointed out the problem, bring a solution.
I mean, it is crazy to me that today, you know, in America, like it's more expensive to eat healthy and than it is to go get like a hamburger like at a fast food restaurant. And I'm like, how does that make
me
how does
and
that
my
make
coworker
sense?
were just talking about that. It costs like we're trying to eat healthy and it costs what, $15? Where I could have went and got a jumbo jack with cheese for $1.99, honey.
Exactly.
You know, it sets the divide economically, socially, all those things.
Right. But that's the way it's all. Well, I don't know. I guess it has always been that way because I guess maybe not so much in the 50s because food wasn't as processed, I think, right? I don't think it had as many like, you know, outside forces like Monsanto and those things like really trying to you know, have additives that aren't natural. But
they started mass producing more food, and the only way to mass produce more food to keep it fresh was to put preservatives in it.
Yeah.
You know, they started making more food. The only way to make it last longer was to put all that stuff in it. So and my thing is always this: if that's the way it's always been, where can we change the mindset so it's not like that in the future?
Well, and part of it is now they're finding out that all the preservatives are the things that are causing inflammation, diabetes,
cancers, and all kinds of stuff. If we know that now as a society, like like you said, like what are the things that we're going to do to change that? Like, I mean, it can't stay like that. That they're making too much money. That's the thing. You know, it always boils down to coin. They're making too much money on that. They're making the cancer people. If all this stuff is causing cancer, guess what? There's money in cancer meds. There's money in producing it. There's money in transporting it. There's money in making sure the people in the cancer meds have the organizations that are helping them. There's all these things that are keeping everybody in business. You know what? If we go to war, like we've been in a war for years, that's big business. Somebody got to make the bullets. Somebody got to make the guns. Somebody got to make the airplanes. Somebody's got to make all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So what better way to keep America in business but be at war?
Well, and not to mention that there's no money in healthy people. I mean, that's another big thing.
If everybody was healthy, you would
need healthcare.
You would need the 30 minutes and stuff because everybody's healthy.
Yeah, I mean that.
But we crave a society like that, right? We crave a society that we're all mentally stable. We crave a society that we all have all our needs met. You know, we crave a society like that. I was talking to someone earlier that if we had more, the people who are in jails and prisons, all the ones with mental problems, if they were all taken and put somewhere else, had their needs met, they wouldn't be committing all these crimes because they're mentally stable.
Right.
You know, the overcrowding and stuff like that has just gone haywire. So we as the LGBTQIA people, I'm all about healing because all that trauma and all that stuff that's happened to us in the past and and the stuff that's passed to us from generation to generation, we have to heal. If we don't heal it, we'll keep on having these open wounds, and we'll keep on repeating the same patterns. Right?
So on that note, what do you think is the best part about being a queer activist?
The best part of being a queer activist is that I can speak to queers and straight people and say a universal thought. I can say a universal language, which means we all want to be well, that we all can come together. You know, as a queer activist, especially being a person of color, I've noticed that people pay attention when I talk about unity. When I talk about my struggle is your struggle is my struggle. And I noticed that a lot of straight allies understand that. Mm-hmm. They understand it. They tend to listen to barbecue a little bit more.
Well, I mean, it's hard. It's hard not to miss you. I mean, you're that fabulous. So, like, I mean,
attention, black
mama,
right
black
here,
mama right here,
hey, honey. Yeah, you know that kind of thing. But as a queer activist, it's funny. I never thought of myself as a queer activist. Mm-hmm. I just would say things and people would listen.
Well, I mean, that's when you know you got something. I mean,
that's when you have magic, and that's I'm happy that you use your platform like that. We need more of that. We need less of like being on Facebook, doing your little thing, and more of the in your face, like this sharing experiences, which, you know, this is like platforms like this are like perfect, you know, for all that.
Evolution. I think that was one of the hardest parts for me, was that I had done the drag thing. I've been doing it for years, and I knew I had to come out trans, femme, non-binary, but I didn't know how to. And then I had to embrace evolving. We have to embrace that things will constantly change. Wigs will come off and new ones will come on. You know, we have to embrace. We have to embrace that. Yes, honey, the hair's gonna grow back brown, and then you're gonna dye it some other color. We embrace. But embracing that change, and even within the LGBTQIA community, I noticed it's like we got our marriage rights. We're done. We're all done with activism now, and now it's like no, we still military, adoption, trans rights. There's still like all these other things that like we're never done because it's always evolving. We would like to have all this stuff already taken care of, but it's not. So we have to evolve into the next thing and not be resistant.
And then also not forget what we've fought for and where we've come to, because I think it's easy to get complacent, especially in our society now.
Well, with the youth, I'm a big proponent of honoring our LGBTQIA elders, the ones who lived through the AIDS epidemic. You know, the ones who marched on Stonewall, the ones who marched on Black Cat. You know, let's not forget Black Cat. Black Cat was way before Stonewall, and nobody talks about that. Nobody honors those people. You told me it was hard to find people who was even around at that time.
No, it was crazy. We asked so many people, and you know, some of the elders that we talked to, they're just not alive anymore. Like
they're alive, but they're living quietly because that's how they were conditioned. And now we have to like weed through everything and go, hey, did you live through that? Yeah, I did. Oh my gosh, let's honor you. Nobody honors them. We need to honor them.
But then also, you know, because AIDS was such a rampant, and it just destroyed a generation. I mean, that's another thing. You know?
I remember in the 90s when I would perform at clubs. I started performing at clubs over in Orange County. And I remember our clubs would be full of people. Especially we went to the clubs like Boom Boom Room and down in Orange County. Those were like where the older gays went. And I remember going to those clubs and they'd be full. And I would look in the corners and see all these shrines put up. And I would go, what are those candles and stuff? What's that for? And they're like, oh, that's all the people that we've lost. And it was like shrine after shrine after shrine after shrine. I was like, all these people, and I would ask the bartenders, they've worked there 20, 15, 20 years. I said, what happened to these people? They're like, AIDS. AIDS took them. And a lot of them are like, nobody cares. Everybody just gets drunk to forget. And I said, so, well, we can't forget. I said, we as close forget our heritage. We bring it with us each time, and that's the thing that worries me too about RuPaul's Drag Race and stuff like that. It's beautiful. I love that we've gone mainstream. Love it, but we cannot forget our history. We cannot let that slide off because it's sponsored by whatever, so we don't talk about it. And we need to make those spaces to honor those people.
That was a beautiful sentiment. So thank you, Miss Barbecue, for your lovely thoughts behind all of this. I think, like I said, I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
And, thank you again for doing this. And, I look forward to seeing you more in the future. So remember, book her. She is available. As soon as the clubs open up, right here. I'm a testimonial. she will work your club. All right, my dear.
Honey,
Sending you love and luck and prosperity. I can't wait to see what you do in the future.
Thank you.